Hope you're all doing well. Oh, it's Sunday, so sure you all have a. Hope you all had an enjoyable weekend, a restful weekend with you and the family. And we are waiting for Ben to join us.
Hello.
Hello, Ben. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Thank God, bro. Doing well. New week. Shabbat feels a million years away already, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Even though its holiness stays with us for another 3 days. You could say Havdalah up until Tuesday. Or that's what we're taught. You had a good week? You had a good weekend?
Yeah. Last week was a little tough. We had our first round of sickness in the house with a baby.
Yep.
So it was a lot to figure out. Everybody was like nobody was like sick and dying or anything like that. But it's
just a new dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to say you should have. They should be far and few between, but the reality is, especially with kindergarten, right? Part of the immune system building up, and the vicious cycle of waking up, finding a kid in your bed, and realizing I'm waking up sick tomorrow, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yes. It's very difficult also to see those things when you're in it, in the thicket.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to be like, in retrospect, be like, oh, that day you had to be homesick with your kid and like you missed work, but like at the end it was worth it because you got time to spend with your kid. So I guess as much as possible, try to remind yourself of those things, but it's also totally okay to be, overwhelmed because it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
In the best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We are continuing with the eighth and final chapter of the 8 chapters of the Rambam. Just a reminder, just something I was thinking about, Ben, in our synagogue, in our shul, we are doing a review of Pirkei Avot. Ethics of the Fathers, as it's accustomed to do up until Pentecost, Shavuot, as well. Now, the way they're doing it in the synagogue is every week someone else basically reads through a whole chapter, right? So like all the subsections, all the Mishnah through it. Everyone reads one version, one Mishnah, and then we dive into one of them basically. So it's always very difficult to me when I'm sitting there because I'm like, there's so much on each one of these things, and each one's a heavy hitter. But you gotta you got to
pace yourself. Yeah, sometimes it's like.
Right. So I told them, they're like, Chezi, I'm like, I can't do this format. I could participate, but like giving this format is too difficult for me. I wouldn't know. I would feel like I wouldn't know who to prioritize.
Yeah, I'm doing a Chavuta too now on Pirkei Avot, and it's also going for a chapter a week, and it's very hard. It's not enough for sure.
When you spend an hour plus on 1 or 2 Mishnayot, right? Spending an hour on 17 is very different. Yeah. Okay, but that's also for our lifetime in general. That's something for you to have now in your in your utility belt, and when you're learning it with someone else right now, you have those insights now to share, and as you learn more insights, you gain more insights. They start becoming. They start sometimes fusing into new insights, so it's fun. It's a beautiful experience learning the Torah.
Yeah.
Okay, at the stage. Okay, we got this too.
I wasn't sure if this was where we stopped.
Scroll down.
I thought maybe, but it might be 7. Wait, sorry.
We did this. Yeah. Scroll down. Mm-hmm. What's the next one?
Right. No.
No. This we've gone too far. Sorry. We've gone.
Maybe
Go
we
back.
did part of it. I don't know. Like
No. I don't think so. I mean, it's all we're talking about the same topic over here.
Yeah.
No. Further up. Maybe we did. I think we did read this part. I remember stopping before Hamid Kal when he's about to get into the kalam again about the.
Midrashim.
Yeah, maybe it's the midrashim or maybe it's come. I didn't forget what. No, let's go back further up. No. We did this.
Let me see. Okay, again.
No.
Oh, actually. Oh, maybe we did go further.
I think we did go. Maybe it's just further down.
6, but apparently it might be 9. So,
Perry, what do you say?
I thought it was paragraph 6, but apparently it might be 9.
What does it say 9?
So
right, exactly. You see that? I mean, I just saw it over there. That's where we stopped off last time. Further down, correct. We said you throw the stone. You and I mentioned gravity, and he was like, "We're not talking about gravity," and we're like, "We know we're not talking about gravity, but we really are talking about gravity."
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's go back up for a second. So we're just okay, fine. Right. So we were saying basically that God wills everything, right? And it's there's this misconception that we're talking about that it's not every individual action, right? It's really there is God creates the natural laws, and then he's embedding them into creation. So when a stone falls, right, it's because gravity exists. Again, we understand that at that time they're not talking about gravity per se, but the logic, which is these are things that are already built inside the Aristotelian physics as well.
Right.
So God, exactly. God is willing these laws. He's not micromanaging every motion. And we also spoke about how this relates to the mystical idea of Ratzon, right? God's will, right? Which is we see his will as, this is before time, right? And this is, according to the Ari, the famous rabbi and mystic, once that will goes through, once there's God's will, then it goes through Seder HaShtalshalut, right? It goes through the chain of unfolding, right? We could look at through the spheres, but ultimately both of them are agreeing. The Maimonides and the Kabbalists are both agreeing that miracles and nature, they're both stemming from this initial intentionality of God, right? So that's where it starts. So that's what we were talking about basically. But now we're moving on to the next portion. Thank you. שמעתים אומרים, החפץ בכל דבר עת אחר עת תמיד, ולא כך נאמין אנחנו. כי אם החפץ היה בששת ימי בראשית, ודברים כולם נוהגים לפי טבעיהם תמיד, כמו שנאמר, מה שהיה הוא שיהיה, ומה שנעשה הוא שיעשה, ואין כל חדש תחת השמש.
Nice. Can I read in English?
Yeah, please.
Da mutaklimun. Mutaklimun? Is that how you say that? Are the Midrashim is an Islamic sect.
The Calamists. The Calamists.
The Calamists are, however, of a different opinion in this regard. For I have heard them say that the divine will is constantly in work, decreeing everything to time. We do not agree with them, but believe that the divine will ordained everything at creation, and in all things at all times are regulated by laws of nature and run their natural course in accordance with what Solomon said, as it was, so it will ever be, as it was made, so it continues, and there is nothing new under the sun. This is in Kohen. So, okay, first thing that comes to mind is I've heard people say, "Oseh b'kol yom ma'aseh bereshit." So,
Chadesh b'kol yom ma'aseh bereshit.
Chadesh b'kol yom ma'aseh bereshit. Thank you. So, don't we also believe this? Every day is like a sort of.
That's a very good point. Well, again, that is where we are fortunate to live in a world where we're already saturated with a lot of different Torah ideas that already have woven into our consciousness, right? So it's even the Litvaks, right? Even the rationalists are still davening from a Siddur that has the Arizal's fingerprints on it. So we can't escape anymore where some of these ideas are coming in. So you are correct. Again, we're looking at this through the Rambam, right? But you are correct that these ideas, we obviously have them. The way it's interpreted in, let's say, in the Kabbalistic form is, right, there is this eternal flow, right, of the divine energies, which are from the abundance, from the Shefa, right? Yeah. And this is, so this is coming through predetermined channels, right? So God is not re-willing each detail, but there is a constant flow, right? That's like through spiritual systems, right? These are the Sfirot or the Partsufim. So this, I would say this is a distinction, but it still aligns with Rambam's rationalism while you're keeping this mystical structure, which is, it is daily, but it's not him acting with it as in there's constant flow that flows through the proper channels that are already like a set system.
Yeah.
I mean, and these are always the tensions we have with Hakol Safui v'Rashut Netuna, right? Which are, you have these both systems that are happening.
Right.
Now,
so if I go into Mishnah Torah, the Rambam won't have Mechadesh v'Kol Yom Ma'aseh Bereshit in his Siddur, the way that he puts it together.
And it's not that he wanted Mechadesh b'Kol Yom Ma'aseh Bereshit. His interpretation of that is not going to be that, like, every day there's this like intentional ratzon of saying, like, I want to be doing this. He'll just say, like, I could say that because from the initial will, right, everything was there.
Right.
And we're saying, no, the initial will is constantly flowing through, but they're flowing through predetermined channels, right? So they were always there. So it's not like God is every day saying, I want to give chesed. Rather, there's always chesed. It's happening through the channel that is already predetermined, which is chesed, which is grace. And din is going to happen through din. And, you know, each one is going to come through its own channel ultimately. However, I would say that, again, Rambam specifically, right, his model is really there to preserve this world that has this consistency, and which then we speak about all the time, about also the nefesh needs to be unified, which is for me to take on responsibility, right? Because if I'm living in a world that's fully chaotic and science is impossible because I don't know what's happening when there's miracles happening constantly, and the laws of physics are breaking down, I could also say the moral law then breaks down, right? How can I be accountable for my behavior in a world that is constantly changing? And we see this already in the promise that Hashem gives to Noach, right? He says, Od kol yom haaretz zera v'katzir kor v'chom. This is also where we're introduced also again to Shabbat, right? The lo yushbatu. And this is why you can't take a day of rest. For the Gentiles, that's a whole different limud over there for the goyim. But the idea is Hashem is making a promise to Noach, which is from now on, you could depend on the cyclical expression of the laws of nature, or the not necessarily cyclical, but the
seasonal.
Yes, seasonal. But I want to say, as in the laws of nature, right? I'm saying are going to be constant. And now because they're constant and reliable, you can now have an ethical world and a map you could lay out. It's not fair for me, Noah, to come and say, like, you should make sure to wake up early in the morning when there's going to be a flood tomorrow. And I don't know if my neighbor did something bad tomorrow, everything might be destroyed. Instead, God is saying, no, from this point on, you could be sure that there's going to be a system in play. And once that system is in play, now I have demands from you.
Okay. So, well, so you're saying that before there was no set system?
Right. Okay. So that's a deeper level conversation. I would say the Rambam doesn't mention this. I'm just going to this idea of the flood where here Rambam is challenging, saying there can't be miracles happening willy-nilly because there needs to be the consistency. I'm pointing already at the verse where Hashem tells already Noah, I'm giving you consistency. You're pointing out saying, okay, that means that there was a gap where there was no consistency. Right? That would be the claim. And arguably, you could come and say that during that period, right, there's maybe less consistency still going on. It's more in this period of this like chaotic period. And Chazal talks about it that, like, there was 2,000 years of tohu and 2,000 years of this and 2,000 years of Torah. So again, I would say that this would not be your classic road, but you could argue that there was a period where there is less consistency, and there's also why there's less of a demand. Now, this is also where we're introduced to the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach, and then afterwards we have our 10 Commandments following the 6th routine, right? So you can see that this is the first time now God also, in conjunction to this, God can now demand a certain level of morality from people.
Yeah.
Up until that point, you have individuals that are doing that, right? Up until that point, we're searching. Noach was the hope, right? It built into his name. The whole world was hoping that, like, he's going to bring this peaceful time. That didn't work out. Hanoch, we spoke about this in the past, also failed. We have this. We might even get to this later on. Tough. Well, maybe we'll get to this later on. I don't want to dive too deep into this, but it was a good point that you're asking. I recommend going into that a little more.
Okay.
I would just mention again, like, generally speaking, I would say the classic interpretation in Judaism, one of the classic interpretations of Judaism would be that this is God ultimately knows that he could intervene if he wants to, right? He chooses not to override nature in most cases, right? There's like God's permissive will. I'm allowing what I intended to sort of unfold through, call it the laws of nature, call it the partsufim or the spheres, but I'm allowing it to happen. And I'm doing it through my permissive will and not through my active will of like I'm going to change something right now. I'm just sort of letting it flow. And that's part of God's will, is to allow this to happen as well.
Okay. Interesting.
לפיכך, yes, we're here. הוצרכו החכמים לומר כי כל המופתים היוצאים מן הרגיל, שהיו ושיהיו על פי הייעוד, כולם קדם להם החפץ בשש ימי בראשית. הוא שם בטבע הדברים מאותה שעה ואילך, שהתרחש בהם מה שהתרחש, וכשהתרחש בזמן שהיה צריך, חשבהו לדבר שנתחדש עתה, ואינו כך. וכבר הרחיבו הדברים בעניין הזה במדרש קהלת וזולתו. ועוד להם מאמר בעניין הזה, גם כמנהגו נוהג. ותמצאם תמיד בכל דבריהם עליהם השלום, שנמנעים מתחת הרצון בדבר אחר דבר, ובעת אחר עת, ועל אופן הזה יאמר באדם כשקם וישב. בחפץ אלוהים קם וישב. רצוני לומר שהוא שם בטבעו בעיקר מציאות האדם שיקום וישב בבחירתו. לא שהוא חפץ עתה בקומו שיקום או שלא יקום. כשם שאינו חפץ עתה בנפילת האבן הזאת, שתיפול או שלא תיפול, right? Naturally, that's what they're supposed to do, so it's as if God's will. כללו של דבר שטעמי, שכשם שחפץ אלוהים שיהיה אדם זקוף, שחפץ שאלוהים, האלוהים שיהיה אדם זקוף הקומה, רחב החזה, בעל אצבעות, כך חפץ שיהיה מתנונע ונח מעצמו, ויעשה מעשים בבחירתו. אין כופה אותו בהם ולא מעכב בידו, כמו שהוא ידבר בתורת אמת, ואמר מברר עניין זה. הן האדם היה כאחד ממנו לדעת טוב ורע, right? If he eats from the tree, כבר ביאר התרגום שאור הכתוב ממנו לדעת טוב ורע. כלומר, הן מין זה של אדם היה יחיד בעולם, ואין מין שני דומה לו בעניין הזה, שהוא מעצמו בדעתו, ובמחשבתו יודע טוב ורע, right? Already he can discern, ועושה כל מה שחפץ, ואין מי שיעקב בידו. וכיוון שכן הוא, פן ישלח ידו ולקח גם עץ החיים ואכל וחי לעולם. לאחר שהתחייב זה במציאות האדם, רצוני לומר, שיעשה בבחירתו מעשה הטוב והרע לה כשיחפוץ. יתחייב לימודו דרכי הטוב, ושיצווה ויוזהר ושיאנס ויקבל שכר. והיה כל זה ביושר. ראוי לו שירגיל עצמו במעשים הטובים, עד שיגיעו לו המעלות. ויתרחק מן המעשים הרעים, עד שיסור ממנו הפריטיות שהיו בו. ואל יאמר שכבר הגיע למצב שאי אפשר לשנותו, הואיל וכל מצב אפשר לשנותו, מן הטוב אל הרע, ומן הרע אל הטוב. והוא הבוחר בכך. טוב, he's going to contradict himself later. וכלפי עניין זה ובגללו הבאנו כל מה שזכרנו בדבר הציות והמרי. All right, wow.
That's the dense paragraph.
Yeah, let's a good scroll down. Okay, let's translate. No, שתיפול או לא תיפול. Let's stop there. That's a good place to stop. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
In the translation.
שתיפול או לא תיפול. Stone. Okay, this occasion the sages to say that all miracles which deviate from the natural course of events, so whether they have already occurred or according to promise are to take place in the future, were foreordained by the divine will during the 6 days of creation. Nature being then so constituted that those miracles which were to happen really did afterwards take place. Then, when such an occurrence happened at its proper time, it may have been regarded as an absolute innovation, whereas in reality it was not. The rabbis expatiate very much upon this subject in the Midrash Kohelet and in other writings. One of their statements in reference to this matter being everything follows its natural course. Well, the world follows its natural course. In everything that they said, you will find that the rabbis, peace be unto them, avoided referring to divine will as determining a particular event at a particular time. When, therefore, they said that man rises and sits down in accordance with the will of God, their meaning was that when man was first created, his nature was so determined that rising up and sitting down were to be optional to him. But they as little meant that God wills at any special moment that men should or should not get up, as he determines at any given time that a certain stone should or should not fall to the ground.
Right. So this is a famous conversation or discussion that Rambam has, right, with regards to the miracles, right? Are they programmed? The Maharal talks about this as well. We've spoken about this in the past. Maybe we've alluded to ideas like this about, are these things pre-programmed into creation ultimately, right? Mm-hmm. So this is what Rambam is saying, that these miracles they're not exceptions, right, to the order of nature ultimately, but they're part of the divine plan, right? And they're embedded already in the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And when God has created the universe, right, in his 6 days of creation, all these things are already included inside, right? So it's not deviations from the natural law, right? When the people of Israel, when the sequence happens and the people of Israel are going to stand in front of a Yam Suf, in front of the Sea of Reeds, the miracle will occur, right? It's not because God changed his will at that time, right? I didn't do something new. Rather, that period, exactly what I willed to what was destined to happen at that moment happened, right? So this was supposed to automatically happen, and not automatically when the sequence properly comes into play, right? And this is sort of telling us that the nature is the rule; it's not the exception. And this is this idea of olam kiminago noheg, of how do you see that in English? That the world follows its natural course, right? This is ultimately what is supposed to happen. And he gives this example of like standing up in God's will. This doesn't actually mean, right, like you were saying, that actively God is deciding at that moment that you need to be standing up. Rather, that God's will, right, that human beings are people with motion and action and free choice. And he gives this example, just like the fire is rising, right? Or just like the stone falls. It's not like God is saying at every moment, I will it to fall and I will gravity. Rather, just like that's the natural expression of the stone, so too is the natural expression of the man is to make choices.
Right. So it's the system in which all those possibilities, all those things are possible.
Exactly.
Question.
I'm sorry?
I have a question. But,
of course.
Okay. Well, so in a sense, this makes it seem like, okay, God is, so to speak, creates a system and he sets it up. But if you're saying that he doesn't will anything, does that also mean that he doesn't?
Wait, when did I say he doesn't will anything?
Well, yeah, sorry. So that he doesn't desire any one action to happen, or it doesn't. So that's where I'm trying to figure out.
Well, he said he doesn't. Again, according to the Rambam, he's not micromanaging, right?
Okay. So here's my question, and then maybe it will help with the terminology. Does that mean that the way that he sets up the system, does he have no bias in terms of how it's going to function? Meaning that wouldn't he want the system to tilt to the side of chesed? So meaning that if a person has all these possibilities of like extending up or sitting down, wouldn't God want to create man in a way to help him a little bit on making the right choices? Or that takes away from the free will, but still is there?
I did, right? עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה, וכל תומכיה מאושר, דרכיה דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה אמת. Shalom. God is giving us, right? I created Yetzirah, v'hechanti lo marpeh, right? I created him. I've given you a system to allow you, and this is what the Rambam is talking about, is finding that balance in the middle, right? Not too much grace, not too little. Not like all these things, you have to find this balance in order you can do it. Now, God gives us hints of Mahu Rachum Afata Rachum, right? He gives us his attributes. So we learn from his attributes certain things of how to act. And of course, we have prophecy that's telling us this is what God wants you to do as well, right? God is, by the way, because he's like, wouldn't God want to help us? He would. It's called like the 10 Commandments, all the miracles, him saying, hey guys, hi, prophets, do better. And Rambam's going to get into that, which is like, this is the big, even more than that, right? This is going to be the challenge. God is so involved, maybe too involved. We'll get to the point where the challenge is like, doesn't he tell Abraham, I'm gonna put your kids in servitude, right? So like, where's the free will sort of in that? And like, how are you helping us? Now, you're touching upon another deep thing, which is this idea of, it's an idea that's developed very nicely by Manitou about hamitnaged v'hamitchareh, the competitor and what would be the mitchareh?
No, mitchareh might be
the competitor. The mitnaged is the
contrarian or the oppositional.
The oppositional, right? The oppositional. So we really need to read the Torah. And when we read the Torah, we're supposed to be reading it not as if like, oh, we already know how the story ends, right? Now I'm here. It's 2025. I'm in Israel, right? It worked out. I need to assume it could have happened a different way. There's certain things that God wants, right? God wants, he made man in his image. There's free will, and he wants them ultimately, right, to come. Kadoshim to you, ki kadosh ani. I want you guys to come back. And in order to do this, let's see what's going to happen. First, I'm trying to make man, and I need to see where that goes. And then eventually I'm going to find myself like a nation where I can start turning into this thing. I'm going to make a nation, and that's going to be a light onto all the other nations, so everyone could do this thing I want them to do. Mm-hmm. Now, the two versions that we see over here, right? The opposition and the competitor. The opposition, you could see this as Abraham has Nimrod, right? Nimrod is against what Abraham is trying to pull off. He has a different version of how these things have to manifest. And we have Avimelech, and we have Yitzchak, and we have Yaakov, and we have Lavan, Shenisa la'akol et hakol, right? He tries to, and he comes from his family, right? But he knows about this thing that Jacob is trying to do, that comes from Isaac, that comes from Abraham, and he's trying to completely remove that. It doesn't work. You then have the mitchareh. But my point being, like, if Laban won, then it would have been someone else. And if Avimelech won, it would have been someone else. And if Nimrod won, it would have been someone else. And then again, you see that within the family. There's Abraham and there's Lot. And Lot also has Hachnasat Orchim, right? He brings in the angels into his house. And we see the parallels over there where he comes from his family as well, right? He's his cousin from Abraham. Then we have Yitzchak, we have Ishmael, we have Jacob, we have Esau. Here you could see these are people that are not trying to deny the mission of God, like Nimrod or like Laban, right? Or like Avimelech.
Yeah.
Rather, these competitors are trying to offer a different version of what Hashem wanted, of what, not Judaism, but Christianity, not Judaism, but Islam. So these are, it always kind of got a different way. So as far as your question about like, is God like not helping us? The idea is for us to manifest and make that choice. We have to really want it.
Well, okay, you lost me on that last one. Because I thought what you were saying is that God is helping us by giving us, you mentioned the Torah, right? Like you have a blueprint and a guide for like it is like you're set up with a game, right? You have a game board, and God gives you this is the way that you can set up the board so that you can have fun with your friends, and that nobody loses their money completely. It's like it would like follow this guide, and you build this thing that will be manifest.
Yeah, God is making a board and saying someone's gonna win Monopoly. It could have been Ishmael, it could have been Esau. Like they chose wrong and decisions were made. So now we see it was Abraham, it was Isaac, it was Jacob. So I'm saying the Torah is coming and giving you, saying there is redemption is promised. The world will be rectified ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You, the individual, I'm giving you a Torah. So if you follow its edicts, right, and you do what you're supposed to do, you will be able to discern and make the right choice, like Abraham ultimately did, even though there was opposition and it could have gone another way, just like Jacob did. But there was major opposition and it could have gone a different way. And that opposition is multi-leveled, which is, again, this is to show that God created the board, which is, you could see there's other players on the board. We're not living in our own little world. Abraham had other people playing at the same time. Jacob has other people playing at the same time.
Reminds me of I'm having Naftali listen to all kinds of my son listen to all kinds of songs. So there's a kevish Bishasa. So there's a poem about Aisha Kachol. Aisha Kachol or Aisha Yarok. I think it's Aisha Yarok. It's like the green man with a green car and a green road, and he goes into his green cigarette and stuff like that. And then he sees a blue man, and he asks the blue man, "What are you doing here?" And the blue man says, "Me? I'm from a different story." Right. So it kind of reminds me of what you're saying. But like, he has other people, and they have different stories. They come from entry points that are different, but they're still all on the same board. And obviously, it was all created from one place. So it's interesting. But to recognize that, I guess, is tough, or it's also not.
I don't know. I think it's inspiring to read the Torah that way. Read every pasuk being like, "Whoa, this was a close call," and then the miracle is even greater.
Is that I listened to? There was somebody talking about this. I don't know if it's connected to it's in Yom Hazeh. No, okay. So because he was mentioning, I've been thinking about that lately. I'm gonna look it up. Somebody was making a point of like, it says it's in Yom Hazeh, and it refers to something, and it keeps showing up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be related to Yom Kippur. Like it always uses that when it talks to Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. But I really need to look that up because it was an interesting.
It's not really ringing a bell, but that doesn't mean that it's not.
Yeah,
it's not beautiful and deep known Torah. But I mean, I'm just riffing on that, which is again, this is a lot of what Rambam is saying, which is Ad Etzem Yom Hazeh or Maaseh Avot Siman Banim. There are large archetypes or patterns that play out.
Yeah.
Then there's a question how the individual plays within those patterns and what choice he's making.
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue reading. Well, that you read, let's just read it in English from the following part.
from everything follows natural course. Stone should or should not fall to the ground. Okay. The sum and the substance of the matter is then that thou should believe that just as God willed that man should be upright in stature, broad-chested, and have fingers, likewise did he will that man should move or rest of his own accord, and that his actions should be such as his own free will dictates to him, without any outside influence or restraint. Which fact God clearly states in the truthful law, which elucidates this problem, when it says, "Behold, that man is become as one of us, to know good and evil." The Targum, Unkulus, in paraphrasing this passage, explains the meaning of the words "Mimenu ladam tov." Man has become the only being in the world who possesses a characteristic which no other being has in common with him. What is this characteristic? It is that by and of himself, man can distinguish between good and evil and do that which he pleases with absolutely no restraint. Since then, this is so, it would have been possible for him to have stretched out his hand and, taking of the tree of life, to have eaten of its fruit, and thus live forever. Since it is an essential characteristic of man's makeup that he should of his own free will act morally or immorally, doing just as he chooses, it becomes necessary to teach him the ways of righteousness, to command and exhort him, to punish and reward him according to his deserts. It behooves man also to accustom himself to the practice of good deeds until he acquires the virtues corresponding to those good deeds. And furthermore, to abstain from evil deeds so that he may eradicate the vices that may have taken root in him. Let him not suppose that this characteristic have reached such a state that they are no longer subject to change, for any of them may be altered from the good to the bad, and vice versa. And moreover, all in accordance with his own free will. To confirm this theory, we have mentioned all these facts concerning the observances and the transgressions of the law.
Right, so he's expanding more about what we were just saying earlier, which is like this is all the focus on, and he uses, obviously going back to the verses, saying that clearly humans have this capacity. And that's what's novel about this whole game, right? The idea is that they can possess this idea to discern and decide. And like God tells Cain, "Vatatim shobo," right? In a certain, again, a controversial idea of money too, which is we all think that we're still trying to redeem the original sin of Adam, right? But Manitou says that was already rectified by King David. Okay, he does this whole thing. Adam gave 70 years to David, and the fact that King David eventually asks for forgiveness from God and becomes the king, and by becoming the king, he's at the point of power, and he immediately submits to God, right? This is also the culmination of like Moses, the desert, the Jewish people finally come back to the land. They did it. They finally made a king. They got to that position of they're back to the land, and they believe in God, and they have a king, and that king submits to God. And by doing though, that was sort of the rectification of man to his maker. Mm-hmm. What Manitou says, what we're still trying to rectify till today is the sin of Cain and Abel, which is Cain killed the other, Ben Adam L'Chavero, and Abel allowed himself to be killed.
Allowed himself to be killed,
which is he should have fought back. He shouldn't have been so naive. It's a whole reading of like how they're wrestling, and he tells him Abel manages to knock Cain down,
right?
And then Cain, inside the verse, you could see it where Cain you're in the middle of an argument basically. Cain calls out to him. Abel listens, and then Cain tricks him and knocks him down. But the idea being that God tells Cain that there is evil out there and you can control it. You could overpower it. So that is why, because we have free will and because God is loving to us, he is giving us a system of reward and punishment, which will allow us to be able to conduct our life in a way which is healthy for us both spiritually and psychologically and physically as well. But of course, giving us these laws, this brings up a question. והרי נשאר לנו דבר שנבררו בעניין הזה, בזה שיש כמה כתובים שעליה על דעת בני אדם, הם שאלוהים גוזר המרי ושהוא כופה בו, וזה שקר. ועלינו לבררם שכן הרבה התלבטו בהם בני אדם. מהם אמרו לאברהם ועבדם וענו אותם 400 שנה, like we were alluding to. אמרו ראה הרי גזר על מצרים שיחמסהו זרע אברהם ולמה נפרע מהם, הלא בהכרח באין ברירה השתעבדו בהם כמו שגזר.
Okay, so it now remains for us to explain another phase of this problem, which arises from the fact that there are several scriptural passages in which some think they find proof that God preordained and forces man to disobedience. This being an erroneous opinion, it becomes our duty to explain these passages, and so many people are confused regarding them. One of these is in which God said to Abraham, and they, the Egyptians, will make them, the Israelites, serve and they will afflict them. Is it not evident it is claimed that God decreed that the Egyptians should oppress the seed of Abraham? Then why did he punish them? Since, owing to divine predestination, it was it was inevitable, it was decreed that they should enslave the Israelites. So why punish the Egyptians? Inexorably. I can't say that.
I wonder if we should already read the answer. Yeah, let's read the answer as well already.
Okay.
והתשובה לאלו, right to this question, למה זה דומה? כאילו אמר יתברך שהנולדים בעתיד יהיה בהם מרמה ומציית. צדיק ורשע, וזה נכון, ולא יתחייב במאמר זה פלוני הרשע שיהיה רשע מכל מקום, ולא פלוני הצדיק שיהיה צדיק מכל מקום. אבל כל מי שהיה בהם רשע, הרי בבחירתו היה, ואילו חפץ שיהיה צדיק, הרשות בידו, ואין מונע לו. לכן כל צדיק, אילו חפץ היה רשע, ולא היה מעכב בידו. כי הדיבור לא בא על איש פלוני הידוע שיאמר, כבר נגזר עליי. ואומנם בא על הכלל, ונשאר כל איש בבחירתו לפי עיקר תלודתו. וכן כל אחד ואחד מן המצרים אשר חסמו את ישראל והראו להם, אילו חפץ שלא יחמסם, הרשות בידו, שלא גזר על היחיד שיחמוס.
Okay. The answer to this is as follows. Suppose God had said that of those who were to be born in the future, some were to be transgressors, and other observers of the law, some pious and some wicked. Such would take place, but it would be by no means follow from this divine decree that a certain individual would necessarily have to do evil, or that another pious individual would be forced to do good. On the contrary, every evildoer would become such of his own free will. If he preferred to be a righteous man, it would be in his power, and nothing could prevent him from becoming such. Likewise, if every righteous man preferred to do evil, nothing would hinder him. For God's decree was not pronounced against any certain individual, so that he might say, it has already been decreed that I do this or that. But these words apply to the race in general, at the same time allowing every individual to retain his own free will according to the very makeup of his nature. Consequently, every Egyptian who maltreated or oppressed the Israelites had in his own power not to do them any injury unless he wanted to. For it was not ordained that any certain individual should harm them. Interesting.
Right, so
I would just say, and you can probably pick up on this, it just reminds me very much of the story in the Talmud about Nero.
Yeah. Nero, very, very bad man.
At least in that story, he decided not, like, why would I become the arbiter of evil so that God can punish me, right? He said, okay, I won't do it. I mean, that's what he did, right? Like, I see where I'm going. I'm seeing where I'm walking towards. It's a trap, so I'm going to go. And yeah.
So we're going to get to this also when we get to Pharaoh. But basically, I'm going back to the 7th and the 6th chapter also, where we with the Rambam we have to preface this with saying, again, we spoke about how there is specific actions against like the prophecy sort of referred to Israel, really, and it's not talking about the specific Egyptians, right? Which is, it's not really that like every individual Egyptian, right, was forced to enslave the Hebrews. Ultimately, is what we're telling over here, right? And anyone that wanted to do that is doing so because he wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And the prophecy is really predicting that someone is going to enslave the Israelites. Like I was saying about like there's patterns that have to play out, but there's wiggle room within those patterns. It could be the Egyptians. It could be someone else. It could be 100 years. It could be 400 years. We're told that, let's say, if Joseph wouldn't have stayed, that would have been it. Like they would have been there for a little and everything would have been fine, right? We speak about this a lot of time. If King Hezekiah praised God, then he would have been the Messiah, right? There's different options that we could make there are more wormholes, right? That you could cut into that allow you to sort of cut this thing in half. That those wormholes are still happening within the same laws of physics that are happening.
Yeah.
Right. We could probably go back to that later on. Again, and just from a Kabbalistic view, again, there's a difference between the klal and the prat, right? We spoke about this when the Rambam was against the idea of astrology, how in the mystic tradition, a certain nation, a certain area might have its predetermined sort of situation going on, but then the individual inside of it has free will, again, how to act, right? So you could be like, there was bad juju with regards to, or juju is the wrong word, there's bad woo-woo with regards to Egypt, but as far as like how that was actually going to specifically play out, it didn't have to play out exactly like that. But to get more into what he's saying about like each person over here, which is, again, it's the prediction really concerns the general pattern, right? And not the individual. And we gave this example again, like I said earlier about the mitchare and the mitnaged, right? It could have been different people. And that's the general pattern that's there, but I can decide what I'm doing with it ultimately. And I would say sort of like, is it like in the Greek? So I guess we could get to in the different area. But even someone with a very, very strong identity, right? I'm known as a very righteous man, or I'm known as a very wicked person. I could still change my behavior, right? We're known about the high priest that was, he was the high priest until the age of 80 years old. And then he stumbled and we learned about this in Pirkei Avot. Nevertheless, don't think till you get to the day you die. Don't judge anyone because it could be the last second you fold, and vice versa. You have people that like are living horrible lives, Rish Lakish, but suddenly he decides to leave everything behind and become a great scholar of Torah. And I would just say that this is the difference between us and the Greeks, which is there's the prophet is not here to tell you what is going to happen, and you can't just escape it.
Right, like a fate.
I see based on the behavior you're doing, this is what will inevitably happen if you continue down this route. And you can change your fate. You could redeem yourself. Right?
It's definitely a very interesting and interesting distinction, obviously. I wonder how that plays out. I mean, the things that you brought out about the Prat and Klal, like the individual versus the society or the nation, or however we want to conceptualize that. That's very interesting because it's a very, I don't know, there's so many dynamics there why, okay, so if you're saying the pattern overall of the society of the nation is such that something bad is going to happen, but on the individual level, it can be changed. So something can change on the individual level, or it's the pattern is not. So yeah, there's something there that's interesting. And I don't know if sometimes I know that in prayer we say, it's interesting that in prayer we sometimes say, achzirenu b'tshuva, or achzirenu, I don't know if it's plural or singular, but there's so many examples of sometimes you take bring us in tshuva, or the God of our fathers or the God of my father or bring me in true fathers. Like there's ways that you ask God for something personal and you ask something on a nation level. And I'm sure it has something to do with this, or there's a way to kind of like figure this out.
Most definitely. I mean, you also see this right now in the war, right? When during times of peace, the Torah has a lot of things that you as an individual are dealing with, right? You have your life, you have your mitzvot, you have your rules that you're living in. Mm-hmm. When it's time of the nation, then you think about the klal, and the klal is like, it's fighting for a nation, serving for a nation, dying even for a nation that you're taking on. Yeah. And that's because you see yourself as part of this klal. This is something that I was alluding to last week, which is when you look at even scary things like October 7th or the Holocaust, we know that it's not that person 1 in Nova or captive number 36 didn't brush his teeth the right time, so now God is punishing him. Yeah. That is so the idea is that like his calculation shouldn't be, am I being punished? That doesn't mean, and this is horrible, that he is not swept up into part of a collective sort of punishment that's going on, which is that has to do with a pattern. Now, again, we are just talking right now, and it doesn't look, no one's watching us.
Well, I mean, it reminds me, I mean, just to bring this, to make it maybe a little less controversial, but I mean, this reminds me of Jordan Peterson. I remember him making a point of like, when you think about what happened to New Orleans and the hurricane, you can think, okay, well, it was a natural occurrence that happened and swept the whole, and like they couldn't predict it, or it was terrible. Obviously, it was tragic, but in a sense, if you read through what preceded it, it was gross negligence in terms of the municipality, right? Of how they prepared for this kind of things, of how they, right? So like you're saying, there's a pattern that if somebody's really looking from the outside and makes a point of actually predicting something, you can say like there's like something's gonna go wrong here. And people say that all the time, right? You can look at something and you understand like these people or this place is they're not paying attention to what could happen, right? So
that is, like we've spoken around the past in these chapters, as far as evil being many times as far as reward and punishment not being like a game show, but being rather the natural reaction to what happened. Like if you put your hand in the fire, it will get burnt. Now you could be like, that is a direct cause. I could directly see the effect. Some of these things are removed by a few levels, right? Which is like, I did X, and basically I've created myself a living hell of how I live my life right now, because I said lie number 1 and I did this and I did that, and now it's cascading. And I can be like, why is this happening to me? And it could have been like, you're right, when you took that left, you should have took a right.
Yeah.
And once, I think we'll stop over here, but once we will get even a little further in, and this is where it gets difficult with the Rambam, because we've said this earlier on that you could be severed off, right? The Kabbalists are going to tell you that like at some point, at some level, like the spark is still there, and like there's always a place back home. The Rambam is saying, listen, if you really mess around, not only do like it's not that God is, we'll get about this with Pharaoh. It's not that God's hardening your heart. You're not even in the room. God's not like, there's no one to talk to. Like you've been severed off. So the punishment is, if you keep on closing the window more and more, at some point, you won't be able to have any conversation with me. If you keep on diluting your Wi-Fi signal, at some point, there is no connection. And that is the punishment. It's not saying like now it's
right. That's the Pharaoh.
It all comes from God, but it's not God is coming and saying, hey, I'm now deciding that you can no longer be saved. Rather, I created a system, and that system, if you keep on poking at it, the result will be that you can no longer repent.
Right. So I understand what you're saying. I guess the problem is that that it's tough for people. I don't know if this point is important or not, but for me it's important because I have conversations with both religious people and non-religious people. But people have an issue with with I guess with
Don't say something racist right now.
no. It's like I'm just not being able to with not they have a problem with pointing out that it is God that is responsible for those things that that happen, for the reward and punishment, because for them, because there's such a difference between the agentic and the arenic, right? It's like that saying that somebody is punished because they didn't do something, and then God in an agentic way punished them is so triggering, maybe for some religious people too, but especially for people that don't understand that there could be a relationship like this with God, or that it can be conceptualized in that way. But the idea, what we're saying here, I guess, is that there is no difference between the agentic and the arenic. It's the same thing, in a sense, right? Because he wills everything, and everything comes down.
But that, and I've said this many times, that's why we close our eyes in Shema, because you're right. It's too hard for people to say that Elohim, the arenic, is Shem Havaya, the agentic. Are we saying that cancer is also from him? And it's hard for us to say that. So much so that our blessing is Baruch Dayan Emet, right? Like that's built into the system. We're saying like it's all from you. Then the rabbis are being sensitive, are saying, okay, that's true, but like we said in Pirkei Avot, don't call out someone when the dead is lying in front of him, because you can be like, what do you mean? It's also from God. Then why are you even crying? Why are you not being like Aaron? Like, dude, the guy can't handle it, so just chill out. And that's why we also say the guy could come and say, listen, you know what? I accept it fully and I'm fine, because that's what God wanted. And we know people like that, unfortunately, whether they're Christians or Jews, which, let's say, won't do blood infusions or won't take some things because they believe that, like, who are we to interfere with our son's cancer, right? Like, why should we go to the doctor? Because that's us interfering with God's plan. Now,